So for parents of 9-month-olds, oftentimes with my first baby didn't crawl until 10 months.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's this kind of perception that your baby should be crawling at 6, 7, 8 months, but really the majority of babies crawl a little bit later. I remember reading that it was between 6 and 10 months is the average range, but really it's kind of later in that range that babies start to crawl. Can you talk to that a little bit about the crawling, movement towards crawling, what it takes to help a baby crawl?
Right. Crawling is getting a lot of press recently because a lot of babies are skipping crawling nowadays. And so parents are particularly worried about this one. And so when they don't see it at 6, 7, 8 months, they get a little panicky and they reach out and say, oh no, my baby's not crawling yet. But what I like to remind parents is that for these big milestones that get all the press in the baby books, there's always all these little mini milestones on the way that are so subtle. So some of those for crawling might be a baby who's pressing all the way up through their arms in tummy time and then starting to pivot in tummy time. A baby who's doing what I like to call the face plant, where they're not actually getting up on hands and knees, but they're lifting their bum up and getting their knees under them. Meanwhile, their face is like crushed into the ground. That is part of the progression towards crawling. They haven't figured out how to put the upper body and lower body together, but they're doing each separately. Then you see babies who press up and then swim with their arms out and then press up and then swim. That's all prep for crawling. So as long as we're seeing those, even if your baby is 10, even 11 months old, if your baby's not crawling, as long as we're seeing the progression towards it and the gaining of new skills and new strengths, I don't fret about what month it is. It's really not a race. And a baby who crawls at 6 months is not any better off necessarily than a baby who crawls at 10 months.
And can you talk about how to keep a baby in tummy time position? We talked about this throughout the stages, but I think it's such a great reminder. Oftentimes when they're rolling out of tummy time or they don't want to be there anymore, how do you entertain them at this age during tummy time? And how do you think about kind of getting them to pivot and start to move around in tummy time?
Yeah, a big pre-crawling stage that most babies enter is this frustration stage. And so I like to think about including lots of sensory input, really interesting new sensory inputs for this age. And it's hard because they put everything in their mouths, but you can get a little bit creative with that and put things in containers, put things in Tupperwares where they can see it and shake it and rattle it, but they can't put it in their mouth, or put it in a Ziploc or a lingerie mesh bag so that they can't actually swallow anything, but they can still interact with it. I also like to think about engaging face-to-face. This age is very verbal. They're very into facial expressions. So you can get right down on the floor with baby. And when all else fails, if you have a happy baby who doesn't want to be in tummy time, you can always use your body, your hands to help. I like to do this like on a exercise ball because your hands have to be on that baby. So you have your hands on that baby to keep them on the ball, but they're also staying in tummy time on that ball.
Really fun. Sensory bags are so fun at this age, right? The oil and you can like mix food coloring and they can explore. That's great. And then how do you think about, so we think about crawling and then we think about the pulling up. Like a lot of babies are pulling up at this age. A lot of parents ask, my baby's pulled up, but then they don't know how to get down, or how do you encourage that up-down movement, and how do you make sure that the baby is safe?
Yeah, and a lot of times you hear about that with the cribs at night. So baby's pulled up on the crib and then they're kind of stuck. So you can actually help baby learn how to ease back down. And a great way to do that is when they pull to a surface and they're playing with something at the surface, you come over and you might put the thing just a little below their hip level so that they're doing like a mini squat to get it. And then you start over time to get a deeper squat. And basically you're teaching them how to lower down. And you're also giving them not just the motor plan for how to do it, but the strength. So every time they're doing that rep, it's kind of like us in the gym. They're strengthening all those lowering down muscles.
Yeah, it's also really fun. I took a pillow off my couch and it was great because you can take, they can pull up onto a softer surface and you can not have like if you can move a table back, then if they, boom down, it's not.
Yeah, and you do always want to think about that safe fall zone so that you don't, as a parent, have to worry so much or intervene so much when they're trying to lower down. You can let them sort of trial and error and experience it.
That's great. Thank you so much, Rachel.
No problem.